There's an old joke about a man named Herschel of Ostropol. Well, there are a lot of old jokes about a man named Herschel of Ostropol. Herschel was a trickster, sometimes described as the cleverest and laziest man alive. So here is one classic Herschel of Ostropol joke. Herschel goes into the office of the Chevra Kadisha, the burial society. He announces that his wife has just passed, but that he does not have the funds for a coffin or a shroud. Now, the members of the Chevra Kadisha know that any Jew should be provided with the basic rites of burial. Plus, Herschel's not just any Jew. He was a beloved fixture in Ostropol with his unbounded humor and kindness. So the Chevra Kadisha was happy to lend him the money. A few hours later, the group from the burial society went to Herschel's house to begin to prepare the body. When they knocked on the door, who should answer but Herschel's wife, who was very much alive. They confronted Herschel. "How dare you make such a fool of us?" they demanded. "Just look at your wife. She's as alive and healthy as anyone here." Herschel's eyes twinkled and he smiled. "Look, she's going to be yours sooner or later. What kind of monsters are you, begrudging a man a few extra years of companionship with his wife?" It's a classic type of Jewish joke. The trickster who uses his wits to beat the system. But like all great Jewish jokes, it also toys with the cruelest realities of our lives. Herschel outsmarts the Chevra Kadisha because he has accepted something that the rest of us struggle with. He knows that he will die and his wife will die. And he has managed to accomplish the greatest of human feats, which is to fully live in the face of this reality. It could be said that Herschel appreciates his wife more than anyone else in Ostropol appreciates their spouse, even if we only know that because he has found a way to exploit his appreciation for cash. Herschel of Ostropol never met the American writer Elbert Hubbard, but they shared a philosophy. Hubbard wrote, "Don't take life too seriously, you'll never get out of it alive." This is the truth of all our lives. And yet how often we try to ignore it. How many of us live in fear of our own death or denial of it? How many of us would be reluctant to even enter the offices of the Chevra Kadisha because it would mean facing the truth that Herschel said, we all end up there eventually. In his book, Being Mortal, the surgeon Atul Gawande set out to try and wrap his brain around this fact. So much of modern medicine is about delaying death. And at that goal, we have been wildly successful. In 1900, the average life expectancy was around 40 years. And over the course of the past century, modern medicine has increased that by an incredible additional 35 years. This has required laser focus among medical professionals, which has meant that many doctors came to see staving off death as their entire job. They pushed for life-extending procedures even when they caused more pain or diminished the quality of that life. When a patient died, they saw it as a failure. But even if our lives are longer than previous generations, death is still inevitable, and so this model is doomed. Dr. Gawande writes, "Death, of course, is not a failure. Death is normal. Death may be the enemy, but it is also the natural order of things." His book calls for a revolution in medicine, a new understanding of the relationship between healthcare workers and patients around the subject of mortality. As Dr. Gawande writes, being mortal is about the struggle to cope with the constant constraints of our biology, with the limits set by genes and cells and flesh and bone. Medical science has given us remarkable power to push against these limits, and the potential value of this power was a central reason why I became a doctor. But again and again, I have seen the damage we in medicine do when we fail to acknowledge that such power is finite and always will be. It's a lesson that doctors have been learning these last few decades, thanks in part to the work of Dr. Gawande and his colleagues. And it's a lesson, at least according to the Midrash, that Moses learns at the end of his life. The penultimate chapter of Deuteronomy opens with these words, V'zot habracha asher barech Moshe ish ha'Elohim et b'nei Yisrael lifnei moto. This is the blessing with which Moses, God's emissary, bade the Israelites farewell before he died. The rabbis, who always wish to wring every ounce of meaning from every word of the Torah, focus on before he died, lifnei moto. This phrase could also mean in front of his death. And so they imagine that Moses is standing face to face with the angel of death who has come to take him to his final resting place. And why lifnei? Why in front of? One rabbi imagines that Moses saw the angel of death and literally threw him down to the ground. Is it not the way we sometimes imagine it? That we can wrestle death, that we can conquer it like a champion in the ring? But in comes Rabbi Meir to say that's not how it happened. Rather, the angel of death came up to Moses and said to him, "The Holy One has sent me to you so that you will die today." And Moses said to him, "Go away, because I want to praise the Holy One. As it says in Psalms, I shall not die, but rather live, and I will tell of God's acts." Is this not also the way that some people think of death? They believe that their faith will save them, that if they do enough pious acts or good works, they can live a bit longer. But the angel of death is not deterred. He says, "How haughty of you that you think that this universe cannot continue without your praise. God already has enough praise. The heavens and the earth will praise God all the time. As it says in Psalms, the heaven tells of God's glory." The angel is reminding Moses that the earth was here long before him and will go on long after he's gone. But Moses still cannot accept this. He says to the angel, "Then I will force the heavens and the earth to be quiet, so that I can praise God, as it says in the Torah, 'Listen, O heavens, and I shall speak.'" And with this, the angel of death backs away, but only to regroup and strategize. Moses' respite lasts but a moment. The angel of death comes to Moses a second time. And what did Moses do? He pronounced the ineffable sacred name of God, causing the angel to flee. In his desperation, Moses has spoken a word that was supposed to be off limits even to him. He has turned to magic curses and miracle cures, but alas, this reprieve is short-lived as well. The angel of death comes to Moses a third time. And seeing him there, Moses finally understands that the bargaining, the prayers, the trickery, bribery, and flattery, all they have done is delay the inevitable. So at last, Moses says, "Because this is an emissary of God, I must resign myself to God's will." As it says in the Torah, the rock, all God does is perfect. What Moses sees here at the end of the Midrash and at the end of his life in this image of his death before him, lifnei moto, is truly an angel, an emissary of God. He sees then that death is not just the reality of life, it is also part of what makes life sacred. Our lives matter in part because they are finite. Sherwin Newland writes, "We die so that the world may continue to live. We have been given the miracle of life because trillions upon trillions of living things have prepared the way for us and then have died. In a sense, for us, we die in turn so that others may live. The tragedy of a single individual becomes, in the balance of natural things, the triumph of ongoing life." This is the truth that Moses comes to understand, which the jokester Herschel of Ostropol knew from the jump, that our lives are short, and after us, people will go on living theirs. Joshua will take over from Moses, and though the book will end, the Israelites' story will continue. And they will go on telling Moses' story. They will carry him wherever they go, and in that way, though Moses will have died, he will go on shaping the lives of the living. Which brings us back to the text. What does Moses do after he throws death to the ground, after he argues and curses and pleads? What does he do when he finally accepts? He offers his people a blessing. V'zot habracha asher barech Moshe ish ha'Elohim et b'nei Yisrael lifnei moto. This is the blessing that this Ish Elohim, this man whose soul was bound to return to God, blessed to his people, his children, as he stood and faced his death. What follows are Moses' final words, and after all the teaching, after all the chastising and dictating, what is left is a blessing. He blesses each tribe, each family separately, offering each his hopes for their future without him. The blessing is written in verse. It's a poem, a song that the Israelites can sing as they go on their way, because a melody can live in our hearts long after the one singing is gone. And through these words, the Israelites remember the fullness of Moses' life, all the myriad gifts he gave them and lessons he taught them. His anger, sure, but also his mercy, his compassion, his love of justice and of his fellow man. Sherwin Newland writes, "The art of dying is the art of living. The honesty and grace of the years of life that are ending is the real measure of how we die. It is not the last weeks or days that we compose the message that will be remembered, but in all the decades that precede them. Who has lived in dignity dies in dignity." And that is why we come to this place on Simchat Torah for Yizkor. Moments ago we read the end and the beginning of the Torah, and it was a reminder of the whole story, all 5 books, what came before Moses and what leads to his lifetime, his triumphs, his failures. And in the small encapsulation of the story, we are reminded of the ways his story continued even after he was gone. We come here to remember those who have come before us, not only their deaths, but their lives, the lessons they taught us, the songs they imbued in us, the words they used to bless us. We remember them in their fullness, not as perfect, but as perfectly human. They were here, and we knew them, and they shaped us with their lives, and their absence in death has shaped us too. And while we may feel sadness that they are gone, we linger not on the loss of life, but on the blessing of living. We come here to remember all our loved ones, and also to consider the story that we are writing. Who will we be in the short time that we are given? Dr. Gawande writes, "You may not control life's circumstances, but getting to be the author of your life means getting to control what you do with them." We come here to remind ourselves what Herschel of Ostropol knew, that eventually the Chevra Kadisha comes for us all. So while we are here, we make the most of it. What matters is not that we die. What matters is how we live and how we use however many days we are given, few as they may be, to offer blessings.